What's up, everybody? My name is James McCool. I'm the owner of paydirt.ghost.io. We're going to be doing a slate review today, going over NFL DFS Week 12, talking about my lineups, talking about subscriber lineups, and talking about the slate overall. We can just jump right into things and just say straight up that this week I got a lot of things right in my analysis, and I got a lot of things wrong in my actual lineups. When it came to both cash and GPP, I got pretty wrecked. Think I ended up like 80% down or something like that. I don't know, like 80% losses or something like that. It's the first really, really bad week that I've had in NFL in a while. It dropped my head-to-head win rate pretty badly. I came into the week with a 72% win rate in head-to-heads, dropped down to 65%. On the year, which 65% is nothing to shake a stick at for sure, but it is not as good as 72%, and I would like to continue being very good at cash games. So I did say last week that going into it, I knew that 72% was like obviously unsustainable. Like those are some insane numbers, and not really something that you can maintain over the course of a season. I was just kind of hoping that it wouldn't all come crashing down in 1 week. But then it did, so that sucks a little bit for my bankroll. But you know, it is what it is. GPPs, I did end up cashing one GPP, one GPP lineup. It was not for a significant amount because the lineup around my core was not super great. But I got a lot of things right this week, and we'll talk about those things. Ganja Gamers channel, Diggs, Brian Hill fucking killed me. Had some decent Henry Chubb lineups with Fitz, Parker stacks. Yeah, I felt very comfortable fading Brian Hill. And I talked about that in the notes, I think, in my team notes, which we'll go over. I am going to go over this today. But I think I said that I was fine with fading Brian Hill. Brian Hill is a bad play. I think the worst play of any cheap running back, so there's an easy fade for me. And the reason for that was mostly just because his opportunity has just kind of been lacking. And we'll go into the opportunity search tool. And when I say his opportunity has been lacking, I don't necessarily mean that like his opportunity in like games has been lacking. It's just like when you looked at the way that this team was put together, if you go to the risers and fallers, and this is in the opportunity search tool, which you can find on the site, and you isolate Atlanta, then like Ito Smith had raised opportunity last week. Keith Smith had raised opportunity. Brian Hill actually had a drop in opportunity. Obviously, Todd Gurley had a drop in opportunity. There were just a lot of running backs on this roster, and I didn't think that I didn't think that Brian Hill was going to be somebody who was going to absolutely break the slate. And two, I didn't think that he was going to have the opportunity that was necessary to break the slate. If you go into the range of outcomes results week 12, which is in the backlogs in the Discord, and then you go over into the explosive play rates, there was another reason to fade him. If you go by explosive run advantage, Atlanta, they're just not a team that is very explosive when it comes to runs. And that's just something that, like, I think that defense adjustments don't matter all that much, but offenses, like, if a team can't run the ball very well with a running back like Todd Gurley or with a running back like, I don't know, Chris Carson or something like that. If a team can't utilize a running back very well and get explosive runs with a good starter, then I don't think that they're going to be very effective with a backup either. So this was kind of a red flag for me in GPPs. Las Vegas obviously was allowing below average explosive runs as well, but like not by a significant amount. The big thing here was Atlanta being a team that's just not explosive in terms of runs. So multiple things. I didn't think the Brian Hill opportunity was really going to be there, and I thought that Atlanta wasn't really a team that was going to be able to run the ball efficiently. That being said, I had him in cash games. This right here is kind of like the core that I decided on in cash games, and we'll get to that here pretty soon on how fucking bad that went. But I did use him in cash games for sure. Oh, hey, 300 bits. Thank you, Angel King. You're awesome, man. I don't know what bits do, so if somebody wants to explain to me what I can do with bits, then explain that up to me. I don't know how people are on the Atlanta defense. Can you explain that, if it's just an ownership thing or just price? It was just price for the most part. I mean, I don't know. We'll go over and look at defensive ranks. Yeah, I didn't have the Falcons very good. I mean, pretty fucking bad. Like Las Vegas doesn't really throw that many, or Las Vegas does not allow very many sacks. They had a pretty decent implied team total. Like there was really no reason to go with the Atlanta defense. So many people playing them must have just gone off the ownership percentage and counter any Carr stacks. Yeah, you could have used the Atlanta defense as a way to counter Carr stacks, but he didn't project to be that popular, right? Like he projected to be okay popular, but not like super popular. So I don't know. I think there was more price than anything. Like they were 2,200, so they allowed you to fit a lot of things. So let's go over cash games. So as you can see here, this was kind of like my default cash build that I kind of defaulted to. I talked about a couple different kinds. So really what it was I had this right here as the actual like core. Dalvin Cook, Nyheim Hines, Brian Hill, the Saints defense, and Justin Jefferson. I didn't love using Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook together, but the ownerships made it work. And then you had to have some questions about how you wanted to go at quarterback and wide receiver and tight end. When you went over and you looked at the tight end ranges, there were really only two tight ends that were actually cash viable. Travis Kelsey and Darren Waller, in terms of my strategy of just playing as much chalk as possible. I couldn't really get away from them, and that caused me a lot of problems. Because if I wanted, like I did actually have the thought in my head of going with Kyle Rudolph, which he was only 2,800, and then also utilizing Josh Allen here, and then using Gabriel Davis or Denzel Mims. I think I had Denzel Mims here, which allowed me to have Stephon Diggs. So this was one version of cash games that I had, but I didn't want to drop all the way down on Kyle Rudolph. Like I really didn't think that dropping down at tight end was right for my strategy in cash. So what that did was it made it so that I had to pay up. And like once I have Darren Waller, it made it so that it was kind of like a given that I was going to have Derek Carr here, which I thought that he was going to be a little bit more popular than he was in cash. And then I was able to go with, I'm pretty sure Stephon Diggs, and I don't remember who the other wide receiver was, but we'll go take a look at that right now. Yeah, Denzel Mims and Stephon Diggs. So this was my cash games right here. Derek Carr, Nyheim Hines, Brian Hill, Stephon Diggs, Justin Jefferson, Denzel Mims, Darren Waller, Dalvin Cook, and the Patriots defense. I dropped down from the Saints quite a bit, down to the Patriots defense. Took the Patriots defense because Arizona allows quite a bit of sacks, and they drop back a lot. They have mobile quarterbacks, so defenses in those situations are pretty good. I didn't mind dropping down to the Patriots defense here. Derek Carr and Darren Waller obviously did not do jack shit. Derek Carr had 3 fumbles and an interception and 215 passing yards. Las Vegas does not score a single point against Atlanta, which is egregious. Nyheim Hines, Brian Hill, and Dalvin Cook, that was a very easy combination to make. Stephon Diggs, again, a very easy choice to make. Justin Jefferson, also an easy choice to make. I could have gone down from Denzel Mims to Gabriel Davis, which I mean, I thought they were probably fine. Like, they were a pretty even play in terms of GPPs, but in cash games, I thought that Denzel Mims was the one that was going to get a lot more ownership, so I went with him. Obviously, this only scored 97 points. It was pretty bad. We're looking at Crafty Lefty lineup here. He takes my head-to-heads quite a bit. His lineup, he went with Ryan Fitzpatrick, who that like makes sense as a cash game play as well. Like his was really, really chalky too, right? Like Ryan Fitzpatrick, Dalvin Cook, Nyheim Hines, Calvin Ridley, Justin Jefferson, Travis Kelsey, Brian Hill. The only things that are really different here are Keelan Cole and the Vikings defense. And I think that you could have made this using the same strategy that I utilize. You just would have had to go with Ryan Fitzpatrick and go like down to Keelan Cole, and like you can afford this pretty well using the same strategy. So this is really only a couple players difference, but it was obviously a very drastic difference. Now, when I'm looking at this, I don't think this cash lineup was bad. I think that obviously it hit a lot of floor games here, right? Like this is a total floor game from Stephon Diggs, total floor game from Derek Carr, total floor game from Darren Waller, total floor game from Dalvin Cook. Like I don't mind putting all of this together. The fact that I made any money in head-to-heads this week is a testament to the strategy, period. So anyway, head-to-heads were a train wreck. I think I lost like 85% of them or something like that. It was pretty fucking bad this week. But that it is what it is. Like, you can't expect to make money every week. Otherwise, you would be predicting the future, and you would be doing other things other than playing DFS, predicting the future. But with that being said, I think that the strategy was totally fine. You could have utilized the core of Dalvin Cook, Nyheim Hines. Like, you could utilize this core and then built some pretty good lineups from it. So cash games hurt, but that's okay. GPPs, on the other hand, were also not great, but were better. I had a top score of 173.7 with one of my lineups. This was a Tampa Bay stack, bringing back with Travis Kelsey. And then I had also two other lineups where I had a Arizona stack, bringing it back with James White, which was an interesting way to go about that, and I'll talk about that here in a sec. And then for my third lineup, I had a Charger stack. So like, when you go through and look at the models, like, I utilized stacks that I had that were highly rated: Tampa Bay, Kyler Murray, and the Los Angeles Chargers. Like, I had all three of those rated pretty well. The ownership was relatively muted on these as well, except for the Chargers. Buffalo, Kansas City, I had pieces of those within my other stacks. So GPPs, we'll talk about that here in a second. Bits are Twitch currency? Word. I will Google that. Did I have any Ingram at 4.5? No, I didn't. I had some Gesicki, I had Hunter Henry, and I had Kyle Rudolph. And again, like, I had interest in all those guys, and I played around with a couple different stacks as well. So let's just kind of jump right into things here. So my worst performing lineup was a Charger stack. I went with Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams. I brought it back with Stephon Diggs. So I had, like, basically the core Charger stack. I think this was pretty much like the easiest thing that you could have built together. It made the most sense. For running backs, I used Giovanni Bernard. I used Jordan Wilkins. And the reason why I used those two is mostly because they were the ones that were going to be the least owned out of all of the cheap running backs. Like, it just made a lot of sense to me to use Giovanni Bernard, coming off of a couple bad games where we saw that he had 20 plus fantasy points in his medians. We thought that his ceiling would be a little bit higher than that. Going up against a New York Giants team that has been giving up quite a bit of explosive runs, it made a lot of sense to use him there as well. He did not pay off, obviously, but you know, that's a situation where I probably should have cared a little bit more about Brandon Allen being the quarterback there. Like, Gio Bernard, I thought would get a little bit more run and get a little bit more checkdowns, but overall the offense is just really, really bad. So me not taking too much consideration into Brandon Allen being the quarterback there, I think kind of bit me in the ass a little bit. Jordan Wilkins at only 5% was, I think, awesome leverage on a whole bunch of people utilizing Jordan Wilkins, or it was leverage on people utilizing Nyheim Hines. Nyheim Hines obviously had the better game, but getting Jordan Wilkins at 5% owned when we have seen him get 20 plus carries and get some receiving yards and some receptions as well, that made a lot of sense to me in terms of taking Jordan Wilkins, especially because he was min-priced. He was cheaper than Nyheim Hines as well. So that was really, really good leverage. I really like the process behind taking Jordan Wilkins. And yeah, he was vultured by Brissett 2 times. And if he scores even one of those touchdowns, he ends up having a pretty damn good day, like 15 fantasy points. So I can't be mad about that. If he gets both of them, then he breaks the slate at 5% owned, and it's awesome. But, you know, the process there and the leverage that it offered, I think were both fantastic. The secondary stack that I had here was Mike Gesicki and Jameson Crowder, which was the Miami Dolphins and New York Jets game. That one was pretty straightforward for me as well. I think that a lot of people were on Mims, and I just thought that with Sam Darnold coming back and with Joe Flacco being the one that has been feeding Mims so much, it kind of made sense to me to utilize Jameson Crowder and try to catch some of that early season magic when nobody was really going to be on him. Especially since this was a secondary stack and all I needed was for Jameson Crowder to do well. I didn't really care if Sam Darnold did well. It, again, makes sense in terms of utilizing the leverage off the field who is wanting to go with Denzel Mims. And frankly, it didn't gain me anything if I would have gone to Denzel Mims either. Like, I could have upgraded Gio Bernard maybe to, I don't know, maybe Nick Chubb. I don't even know if I would have had the money to do that. It would have been close, but I don't know if I would have had the money to do it. So I could have upgraded that. It would have helped my lineup a bit, but overall, like, this lineup wasn't doing anything. Justin Herbert got murdered by his own coach in terms of pass plays and the way that game was called. So there really wasn't anything going on here. But utilizing a low-owned Justin Herbert in a relatively high-owned Keenan Allen and Stephon Diggs stack, that was nice. That was a nice upside that I would take any day of the week. We've seen the Chargers be a team that has a massive ceiling, and considering they were going to be one of the lower-owned stacks today, I was all about that. So it didn't pay off very well. There's a lot of snowflakes in this lineup, but I think the process was sound behind each one of the plays, except for Gio Bernard. And like, I think I played Gio Bernard elsewhere as well. I think I have one more lineup with him. Yeah, I have him in my best lineup, where I maybe should have just cared more about Brandon Allen starting. The Giants D pretty underrated too. Yeah, but I don't care about Giants. I don't care about defense. Like, if the opportunity is there, and the opportunity has been there for Gio Bernard, then I am happy using him, especially when it's only going to be 2% owned. Like, I like to be different at running back, because I think that it's one of the positions that has some of the highest upside if the volume is there, and people just like have a lot of groupthink on running back. So I didn't mind going with Gio Bernard in that spot against that defense, but like I said, I should have cared more about Brandon Allen. You forgot how bad Darnold is? Yeah, he's pretty fucking bad, dude. I don't know. I don't know that Sam Darnold is bad. I don't know that he is terrible. I think that Adam Gase just like is a toxic pit of death that drags every single living organic being down into the depths, and nothing good comes from it. Like, we have seen countless players get away from Adam Gase and have like career years, have incredible success in other situations. And Adam Gase, like, that dude is a succubus. He's so fucking bad. It is insulting to the fan base of the NFL that he is still allowed to have any job on a football field or in a football stadium. I would not let Adam Gase serve me hot dogs at the vendor stand while going to a Broncos game. That guy is just the fucking worst. And I just hate him so much. It hurts because analytically, like, I care a lot about football. I care a lot about sports, and watching him with that kind of shit, just, God, he's so bad. Yeah. Anyway, did I use any Eckler? I swapped out for Robinson thinking his price wouldn't ever be lower. No, I didn't use Eckler, but I thought that he was fine. Like, his median projection was around 19 fantasy points, and he got like 13 or 16 targets or something, and got a lot of targets. I didn't expect that, but I also didn't necessarily think that I needed to take the shot on him. I liked Nick Chubb more, like, near the price. So, well, I was a sucker for playing Mims, but I did cap his exposure, which is a good idea. Thank God. Went way too hard the previous week on him. I think that Mims is going to be a good wide receiver, but it's just not there right now. Like, you can't thrive in that offense. Nobody can really thrive in that offense. We have seen some wide receivers have good games, but I don't think that a rookie wide receiver is going to be utilized correctly by Adam Gase. Okay, so let's get into my second lineup here. This is an Arizona stack. So the Arizona stack, I actually had some of the key pieces of the slate, right? I had Gabriel Davis. I had Hunter Henry, who was pretty good. I had Derrick Henry in this lineup, which was awesome. I had the Titans defense, which I was very happy about. Like, those four players were great. I also had Wayne Gallman, who was pretty damn good. High owned, but pretty damn good. 6 yards short of the bonus. But unfortunately for me, Arizona couldn't fucking score against the Patriots, like, at all. They couldn't do anything. Kyler Murray ended up with, I think, his worst performance of the entire season. 8.9 fantasy points at 5% owned, which sucks. DeAndre Hopkins, 5 receptions for 55 yards at 4% owned. Christian Kirk, 3 receptions for 19 yards at 3% owned. And I brought it back with James White at 6% owned, who had 2 fucking touchdowns. And, like, this one probably hurts more than anything, because this lineup was great. I got the leverage that I wanted. People were down on Arizona. It was a great spot for them against a terrible pass defense, which I know that I don't really care that much about. But when you look at the explosive passing stats, New England is allowing a lot of explosive a lot of explosive pass attempts, and they just shit the bed. Which sucks. It sucks so bad because this lineup had some legs, man. Like, it started out really, really well. And the Cardinals just couldn't score. I thought that bringing it back with James White was really, really smart here, especially because, one, he was a cheap running back, which there was a really important thing in taking cheap running backs this week, and he was one of the lower-owned ones. And if Arizona were to get out to a lead, which I was hoping that they would, James White would be the receiving back as well, so he would be getting the targets. He got 9 targets last week with no Rex Burkhead on IR. He makes a lot of sense. And, like, Arizona just could not get anything going. I'm just like, every time that I check in, I'm like, motherfucker, dude. Like, this was such a good spot. I was really excited for this lineup. I was able to fit pretty much every piece that I wanted to fit. Like, this was the first lineup that I built, and my pride and joy, and it just shit the bed. If that was a KC stack, you would have destroyed shit. I know, dude. I know. I fucking know it. Like, if I just go with... If you simply just swap out Patrick Mahomes or Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins with Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, like, this lineup goes nuts. I did not do that. Like, this lineup would have put up an extra 40, this lineup would have put up like 215 or something. Like, I think I might have actually taken down, I wouldn't have taken down the power sweep, but I would have come very close. Like, this lineup would have put me, like, 18th or something. Which is just so brutal, dude. So brutal. So, yeah. Really, really super, super fucking happy about that. So, have I noticed anything about players that have come off injury and generally performed well? So, no. I think that it is something that... when it happens, people notice it more because those players have been injured, and it is more of like a people are paying attention to that player, so then they end up noticing more when that player does well, I think, because most people aren't on them, so there's like some FOMO, that like there's some psychology stuff going on there. But then, I mean, there's as many situations with Austin Eckler doing pretty well as there are with Chris Carson last night doing pretty badly, coming off an injury, right? So I think that it's just a psychological thing. I think that people pay attention more when players are coming off injuries and when they're like lower owned and stuff like that. FOMO is fear of missing out. So if you like missed out on the Austin Eckler game and you're kicking yourself because he was low owned and he was coming off injury, then you have some FOMO there. You had fear of missing out, and like you didn't, you're bummed that you missed out. Fear of missing out is when you actually play somebody because you're scared that if they go off, then you don't want to miss out on it. But like that same psychological phenomenon exists in terms of like missing out on something and then noticing that you missed out on it. But no, I don't think there's anything actually there for players coming off injury. Let's go over my best lineup. So this was a Tampa Bay lineup. I went with Tom Brady, Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, and brought it back with Tyreek Hill. Sweet. Cool. I utilized 2 different running backs. I utilized Nick Chubb and Gio Bernard. Nick Chubb was awesome. Super happy about that. Gio Bernard, already talked about it, motherfucker. And then I had a secondary stack of Kyle Rudolph and Curtis Samuel. So I talked a lot about Curtis Samuel. I just think that he's utilized really well in that Panthers offense, especially when there's no Christian McCaffrey there. So 5 receptions for 72 yards and 5 rushing yards. If he has a touchdown, like he ends up crushing the slate at 5,100. He was way underpriced. And then Kyle Rudolph, I talked a lot about with Adam Thielen being out and Irv Smith being out. It just made a lot of sense for Kyle Rudolph to be utilized in the red zone quite a bit. That's not really Justin Jefferson's jam. So Kyle Rudolph was going to be more of the possession guy. He was somebody who I think was going to be trusted more with some of the more possession receptions, and especially in the red zone. So I really liked Kyle Rudolph at 2,800. He paid off pretty well, 7 receptions for 68 yards. He was relatively owned, though. So the secondary correlation there between Samuel and Rudolph, I liked that quite a bit. This lineup is great, man. it pretty much went exactly how I wanted it to go, right? Like with Tyreek Hill just absolutely going off and dominating in the first half, and then Tampa Bay having to come from behind. Tom Brady ended up pretty good. He had 2 interceptions, but he had 300 plus passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 26 fantasy points. The problem is that none of it was fucking Antonio Brown. It was to Rob Gronkowski and Mike Evans. And obviously, I did not have Rob Gronkowski in this. What I could have probably done is go with Rob Gronkowski and then instead of Antonio Brown, go with Chad Beebe, something like that, and then I could have upgraded the defense. So I could have done that, and that would have been awesome. But I was never really considering Gronkowski in this lineup, which is a bit of a bummer. I really liked Kyle Rudolph, and that kind of blinded me from the Gronk things, which is why you got to look at things overall and not just in a vacuum. It's a mistake that everybody, I think, makes. But I was happy to have Mike Evans 5% owned. Antonio Brown's a little bit higher owned than I wanted him to be, but whatever. Doesn't really matter to me. This stack was awesome. I felt really good about it. And then the Browns defense against Jacksonville. I didn't expect Jacksonville to put up 25 points. And I didn't expect Cleveland to get literally no interceptions or sacks or anything. Just sucks quite a bit. But I really liked this lineup. Things that I could have done. I could have dropped down from the Browns defense down to the Titans defense and upgraded Chubb to Derrick Henry. That would have been an extra, I don't know, 30 fantasy points or something like that. An extra quite a bit. I could have dropped down from Gio Bernard to Jordan Wilkins or something like that and upgraded Curtis Samuel somewhere. There are some things that I could have done better in this lineup. But I think overall I really liked the way that I built this lineup, and it was one of my favorite lineups that I built. So I was pretty happy about it. It basically saved me from being a 90% loss to an 80% loss. This recouped a little bit, right? And that is helpful. All of it, every little bit helps when you're having such a bad week. But bad weeks happen. So I'm actually going to go unlock this post here in a second so you guys can go read through the notes if you guys are not subscribers to the site. The notes are always a lot of fun. This is one of my favorite articles that I write each week. It is very in-depth and very long, and it covers every single team. So I'm going to go unlock this here in a bit so that people can go look through that. I'm not going to go through it myself because there's a lot of content there and that would take a long time, and I kind of want to get into some of the subscriber lineups as well. So I'm going to jump over. I'm going to find some subscriber lineups to go through, and then probably going to cut this video a little bit early this week. I am decorating for the holidays, so I'm kind of trying to go through some things and get the tree and everything put together. But yeah, let's go find some lineups here really quick. So first off, let's grab Strictly Business. He has written a couple of articles for me. He has written about Pro Play. You can find those articles on the site as well. Those are free to read. And this is his lineup. He went with the Miami stack with Ryan Fitzpatrick, Devontae Parker, brought it back with Jameson Crowder. He also had a secondary correlation stack of Austin Eckler and Gabriel Davis, as well as another secondary of Travis Kelsey and Chris Godwin. He utilized the Saints defense, which, yeah, sure, whatever you got to do. And then he also had Nick Chubb. So this is a pretty damn good lineup, right? Outside of Jameson Crowder, there's nobody that significantly underperformed what we would have wanted them to do. Going with Ryan Fitzpatrick and Devontae Parker, bringing back Jameson Crowder was probably the way that I would have done it as well, though I also would have had Mike Gesicki. Using 2 pass catchers with Ryan Fitzpatrick is usually the right way to go. He's not super mobile. He can run. He does sometimes vulture rushing touchdowns, but I probably would have utilized 2 pass catchers here. Utilizing Austin Eckler against Gabriel Davis, I think that's fine. I've talked about utilizing running backs in secondary correlations that are heavily involved in the passing game, so that was totally fine in this instance. Nick Chubb is a one-off. Really like Nick Chubb. No problems there. And then Travis Kelsey and Chris Godwin as a secondary stack. Travis Kelsey was obviously a fantastic play. Chris Godwin I was not super on, but considering he was the lesser owned of him and Antonio Brown, I think that was the right move in GPPs. And then the Saints defense, I was never going to touch. the Saints defense this week, just because they were going to be 30% owned. But if you're going to be utilizing a stack that is generally under-owned, it was fine to utilize them. I think that it's crazy to use a super chalky defense. I would rather eat my chalk elsewhere, but if that's the decision that you decided to make this week, then that's totally fine. Back to Camaro next week. Hope more involved as a passer. Only if Taysom Hill isn't playing quarterback. Taysom Hill at quarterback has kind of like hurt him pretty badly. I haven't reran any of the opportunity stats yet for this week, but he didn't break the slate. It was Latavius Murray that had 2 rushing touchdowns, so I worry about that team with Taysom Hill at quarterback. Let's get the next lineup. So this is from the Vein 714. This is a Arizona stack, motherfucker. Yeah, Arizona with Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins. Ended up bringing it back with nobody. Why didn't you bring it back with anybody? Every week there's something. Kyler Murray with DeAndre Hopkins. He utilized James Robinson, Gio Bernard as the running backs. He had Devontae Parker, Corey Davis, Trey Burton, and Jamison Crowder. So Devontae Parker and Jamison Crowder is secondary stack. Corey Davis and Trey Burton was secondary stack. I like both of those. Utilizing Corey Davis, I think, was really sharp. He has had a lot of opportunity for his price. Actually, he has been just as involved in the offense as A.J. Brown has been, but has not had the flashy numbers. A.J. Brown seems to do more after the catch, which is fine. Corey Davis was quite a bit underpriced this week. Utilizing Trey Burton, which was cool. It's always kind of like touchdown roulette with the Colts, but somebody's going to catch touchdowns from him. Trey Burton is always a usable piece of that. Going with James Robinson, I didn't love James Robinson because the other running backs have been utilized a bit more over the last couple weeks. Going up against Cleveland, where I thought that it was going to be a low-scoring game, and with James Robinson looking like he was going to be chalk, I just wasn't really into it. He ended up doing very well. I'll eat my words on that, but I was just not in love with the opportunity. That being said, utilizing him and Gio Bernard together, it didn't matter if James Robinson was chalk because you already had a lone stack of Arizona and you already had a lone Gio Bernard. So it doesn't matter what other like ownerships you have. You already have plenty of unique relative points that are being gained by this lineup. And then the Raiders defense getting -1 points. Shitty. Overall, I understand that it's hard to bring somebody back with New England. I get that. But I don't think that it's right to seed. And this kind of goes into, this is kind of like the exact conversation that we were having. Because it was somebody else, I think it was A. Salinas in the Discord, in the community Discord, that was saying if raw points matter more than correlation and when we should be seeding a game stack so that we can get a secondary stack in that makes more sense. And I think that this is an instance where that makes sense. And it was actually the reason why I used James White, because New England is just such a shitty team in terms of passing that utilizing the pass catchers just doesn't really make sense. They're almost as bad as the Jets are in terms of game stacking, because with the Patriots, like, you don't know where it's going to go, and you don't even know if there's going to be any pass catchers that are GPP relevant. Sure, they might be passing from behind, but they're not efficient enough passing from behind to really make that big of an impact. So that's why I used James White. You could have used James White here instead of Gio Bernard, which would have allowed you a little bit more money to go up somewhere else, maybe up from the Raiders defense. But overall, like, I understand why you didn't bring anybody back with New England. I think the secondary stacks here of Corey Davis and Trey Burton and Jamison Crowder and Devontae Parker make more sense than trying to bring it back with Jacoby Myers or bringing it back with Demire Byrd. And I wanted to have that conversation on this stream anyway, because it was a good conversation that we had in the Discord. And it was something that got me thinking a lot more about the way that I am preaching these game stacks. Typically, game stacks are the way that you want to go if both pass offenses are competent. That's why I use James White in my Arizona stack, and I understand not using a wide receiver in this stack as well. Outside of that, I think this is a good lineup. Arizona underperformed. It is what it is. Kansas City crushed, like Tyreek Hill at like 30% ownership, crushed. There's nothing you can do about that. But I do like this lineup quite a bit. Let's go into This is Butters326. All right, so he did point out that he utilized 2 tight ends here because Kyle Rudolph was so cheap. So we'll talk about that here in a sec. He went with a Derek Carr and Nelson Aguilar stack, brought it back with Calvin Ridley. I like that quite a bit. Utilized Curtis Samuel and Dalvin Cook. I think that's fine as well. And then Nyheim Hines he had as a individual play, just as a one-off. Curtis Samuel and Kyle Rudolph also is a secondary stack. So that's where something that we'll talk about is wrong. So utilizing Dalvin Cook and Kyle Rudolph together is some pretty bad negative correlation, simply because the only way that Kyle Rudolph is going to make value is by catching touchdowns. And feasibly, he got there pretty well by not catching a touchdown, but the way that he actually unlocks his ceiling is by catching a touchdown, which is the same way that Dalvin Cook finds his ceiling. So if you have 2 very touchdown dependent players, you shouldn't play them in a lineup together, especially if you're not going to be utilizing them in a stack. For wide receivers or tight ends, stuff like that, it's a little bit more nuanced, but when you have a running back and a tight end, typically they're going to be eating into each other's upside because they both need touchdowns to get where you need them to be to win a GPP. So that's the first issue. I suppose that you could have looked at this and said that you have Dalvin Cook and Kyle Rudolph and that you're bringing it back with Curtis Samuel, where you're saying that Minnesota scores so many points that Carolina has to be coming from behind and passing to Samuel. But I don't think that that's what he was trying to do here. He did note that he specifically used Kyle Rudolph because he was cheap, and that was the only reason why he played 2 tight ends. And that brings me to the next point. Don't play players just because they're cheap. Don't go away from a process just because a player fits your lineup. I've talked about that in previous review streams where we have talked about players that just fit in a lineup, so they just played them because they fit. If you get to the point where you are making that kind of a decision, you should restart your build. You should rebuild your lineup. Get it to a point where you're playing players that you actually think are good and give you a chance of winning the GPP, not just because they fit. 2 tight end, as much as I think that it's a bad strategy, that's not the reason why this is not the correct strategy. It's because you played a player just because they were cheap. Don't make a habit of that. That's a bad habit to be in. It's an especially bad habit as we go into NBA, where when we're talking about lineups in NBA, if you're playing a player just because he fits, that is the absolute wrong way to be building an NBA. But overall, let's get back to this lineup. So Derek Carr with Nelson Aguilar and Calvin Ridley, fine with that. Preferably, instead of Travis Kelsey, you go with Darren Waller here. Because Derek Carr isn't going to win you a GPP by just throwing Nelson Aguilar. He's going to have to throw to multiple wide receivers. And even in that, Derek Carr, not necessarily a quarterback that has a lot of upside. So if he's going to find that upside, he's going to utilize 2 different wide receivers. He never runs it in. He is going to utilize 2 wide receivers. So you needed to have Darren Waller here. The other stacks here with Curtis Samuel and Dalvin Cook, I think I'm fine with that in terms of Dalvin Cook getting out to a big lead and then passing from behind with Curtis Samuel. And then Nyheim Hines, he was a chalky play, but he made sense. So that's probably the only other thing here is that this lineup is just super chalky. There are a lot of very, very, very high-owned plays here. Coming off of Dalvin Cook and going down to Derrick Henry, that would have been plenty enough to get you away from 40% owned in this lineup and giving you leverage over the rest of the field. So a couple notes here. Don't play players just because they fit. Don't play a tight end and a running back against each other if they are both touchdown dependent on finding their ceiling. And make sure that you have some point of leverage in your lineup. Make sure that you have something in there that is leveraging the rest of the field and not just playing chalk. This would have been a fine double-up lineup. This would have been a fine 50-50 lineup, but it's not a good GPP lineup just because there's too much chalk, there's not enough leverage, you're not getting enough relative points to actually beat the rest of the field. Think we should have been more concerned about Murray's shoulder injury affecting his passing. No, just because I have to assume that if a player is playing in a game that they are healthy enough to be playing. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not somebody who is going to be looking at film and finding the differences in their throwing patterns. If a player is playing, I have to assume they are healthy enough to be playing. unless there is word that they are going to be missing parts of the game because of the injury, or they might be pulled. Like a running back, it's a different situation. But a quarterback, like if quarterback's playing, I have to assume they're healthy. So this next one is going to be the Angel King. I hope that you are still in here. We're going to be reviewing your lineup next. So this lineup, fun. Giant stack. So this lineup was with Daniel Jones, Sterling Shepard, and Evan Ingram. Ended up bringing it back with Tyler Boyd. He then also had a secondary stack of Mike Evans and Tyreek Hill, utilizing 2 mid-priced running backs of Nick Chubb and James Robinson. This was awesome. So I talked about a lot of this in the Recipe for Success video. I talked about the New York Giants being like kind of a sneaky upside stack up against Cincinnati. I talked about utilizing mid-range running backs instead of utilizing cheap running backs. I talked about the Kansas City Tampa Bay game being my favorite game stack of the week. I talked about like all of this. Like this is straight from the content this week, and that's awesome. The Daniel Jones injury absolutely sucks, but like putting up 195 with an injury to your quarterback, really good. And also Tyler Boyd didn't even get there either, but like the way that this was put together and like the entire lineup itself with the correlations all involved, A+, man. This is a really, really good lineup. I think that maybe I have no words. Like this is just really, really good lineup. Just awesome job. Thumbs up. High five. Internet high five. Let us go to Parzival, who I think I reviewed relatively recently. He said that he's trying to improve the correlation in his lineups. It was one of the points last week that you made reviewing one of my lineups. Yep. Appreciate the feedback if I'm leaning in the right direction. So let's see if he's learning. He's got Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill with Travis Kelsey. Brought it back with Antonio Brown. So right off the bat, pretty damn good. For his running backs, he utilized Kenyon Drake and Wayne Gallman. Man, Kenyon Drake play. That's the nuts, dude. That's awesome. So both of these running backs can be one-offs. Totally fine. No problem with that. Actually, he brought back Demire Byrd against Kenyon Drake. I'm not sure if you meant to do that, but you can consider that a secondary correlation as well. And you can consider Wayne Gallman with the Giants defense as a secondary correlation as well, if you would like. So long as you thought that the reason why Demire Byrd was going to be getting extra points was because Kenyon Drake was going to be carrying the Cardinals to victory, this correlation makes sense. And then I guess the only one-off that you had was Keelan Cole Sr., and I'm fine with that as well. Utilizing a very cheap wide receiver one-off when you have other correlations going on makes a lot of sense. You could have also gone away from Demire Byrd and utilized maybe Rashad Higgins or Jarvis Landry or something like that instead to go off of Keelan Cole Sr. and leave your running backs being individuals. But I do think that this lineup is much better. There's a lot more correlation here. I think that you put it together in a way that made a lot of sense. Would White be a bring back to Drake, or do not play opposing running backs even if one is a receiving running back? I think you could do that. Yeah, I think you could do that. So long as you understand why you are building the correlation. Like, if you're using Kenyon Drake and James White against each other, right? What you're hoping for is that Kenyon Drake ends up scoring 2 touchdowns and getting the Cardinals a big lead, and then James White is catching passes while coming from behind. That game script makes sense for a team like Arizona up against the Patriots. I think that makes plenty of sense. If you had a situation where it was like Dalvin Cook and Christian McCaffrey, if like the Vikings were playing the Panthers, and you played it to where Dalvin Cook is going to get up a big lead in the first half, have like a Derrick Henry 3-touchdown first half game, and then they have to utilize Christian McCaffrey in the passing game coming from behind, I think that makes sense. I think that that's fine. I wouldn't call it a correlation. I would just call it a game circumstance, because that correlation maybe is a little bit weaker than the wide receiver one, but I think that it makes sense, and I think that it would be something that you could do, so long as you understand why you're doing it. Like, I think that a lot of people could build better lineups so long as they looked at their lineup and for each play that they were making, said, why am I making this play? And if the play is made because you think the projections are good, then I don't think that's good enough. if you are making a play because you think that a certain game scenario happens, that's really what you're doing. Because all this is, like, all DFS is just putting together a couple different parlays and hoping that you hit them, right? Like, it's just looking at each game environment and saying, this is how I think it's going to play out. And I hope that I'm right, and I hope that I make a shit ton of money from doing it. As long as you understand that you are making a play based on a game situation and not based on a projection, I think that you can make plays that you think make sense, because that's going to be subjective. Like, it's not going to be something where, like, I look at it as a content provider and say, oh, that doesn't make sense. Like, as long as it made sense to you, that's what matters, really. Like, everybody has their own process. So long as when you're making plays, you understand how your play has to get there and you're playing to that environment, cool, do your thing. But this lineup, much better. A lot more correlations made together. The only thing I would say is maybe provide, like, maybe go, instead of Demire Bird, go with Jarvis Landry to play off of Keelan Cole Sr. But I think overall, if what you were doing with Demire Bird was playing it against Kenyon Drake, awesome. Good job. Thanks for the critique. The notes you provided for the slate are money. Yeah, I really, really like those notes. Like, if you guys would like a little sneak peek of the notes, here's what I wrote about Denver. Just, nope. That's what I wrote about Denver. But I really do think that the notes that I write each morning for the slate are very, very good. All right, let's break down. Okay, so here's the lineup. All right. So this is A Salinas 1022. He is that in the community as well. And this is the lineup that sparked the conversation about secondary correlations against, or that sparked the conversation of game stacking against secondary correlations in raw points. So we'll talk about this one next. Yeah, I think I'm getting better with theory on stacks, but had too much Diggs instead of Hill, and Brian Hill was bad chalk. Dude, as long as you're getting better, that's all that matters. Like, you have to have long-term thoughts. You have to have a long-term process. Because you don't just, like, DFS isn't a get-rich-quick scheme. It takes time and practice and theory, and it takes a long time to realize the returns of your plays. So long as you get 1% better every day, eventually you'll be 100% better, and that's what matters. I saw that an ex-Denver out of the pool. Damn straight, dude. Damn straight. So this is A Salinas' lineup. And he ended up with Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelsey, and did not bring it back with any Tampa Bay wide receivers. Instead, he used a couple different secondary stacks. So he utilized Justin Jefferson and Curtis Samuel, and he also utilized Gabriel Davis and Austin Eckler. And then he had a one-off of Nyheim Hines, and he had the Jets defense, which is some ballsy shit, dude. Considering the Jets are just a flaming trash can of death. But not having the Tampa Bay bring back here doesn't make as much sense as the other lineup where it was New England as the game stack partner, right? Because the way that Patrick Mahomes gets there, and the way, the way that a stationary quarterback gets there, is by throwing a whole bunch of touchdowns. And those touchdowns, we hope, come in clusters. Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill absolutely broke the slate. Travis Kelsey performed well. If that happens, then Tampa Bay is going to be passing from behind. Now, if it's the Jets with Sam Darnold, you maybe don't need to have that bring back, right? Because the Jets are so fucking bad offensively that, even if they are in a game script to pass from behind, they don't necessarily have the ceiling to actually win you anything in GPPs. Same thing with New England, where it's just rare that a New England wide receiver ends up doing well enough to win you a GPP, even as a game stack. So these offenses that are just absolutely brutal offensively, that's going to be a situation where maybe you don't game stack. But in this situation specifically with Kansas City and Tampa Bay, where it was the highest over-under of the slate, you have to assume, based on the Vegas lines and based on projections and based on everything that we know about these two teams, that Tampa Bay is going to be passing from behind and is going to be efficient enough and effective enough to have a ceiling in that game stack. So maybe if you wanted to look at it in a way that is more actionable and more concrete, If there's a team that is a significantly large favorite, then you can stack them without a game stack back. If there's a team that's 16-point favorites over the Jets, maybe you don't bring it back with the Jets. But a team like Kansas City against Tampa Bay, where Tampa Bay was only a 3.5-point underdog, like that is a situation where the teams are competent enough, both teams are competent enough to where if it's a shootout, both teams can provide GPP winning wide receivers. So I do think that even though in this lineup it made sense to game stack, it did spur enough conversation to where I did change my mind and say, okay, yeah, maybe you don't need to game stack if there's a team that is so shitty that they're not really going to produce a good wide receiver, even if they are in a position where they should provide a good wide receiver. So I just wanted to highlight that really quick. I think that was an important thing to note here because I'm all about game stacking, dude. Like I think that it is something that has brought me a lot of success in the past, has brought a lot of very smart people in the past success, and is going to continue to bring a lot of people success. It did not work out this week as well, but I think that it is still something that you really have to focus on outside of a couple exceptions to the rules, like the entirely terrible Jets. That all being said, this lineup is awesome. Like Austin Eckler against Gabriel Davis is a really nice secondary correlation. Justin Jefferson and Curtis Samuel, talked about them a lot. Great secondary correlation. Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelsey, all three fantastic options. The only other thing here is maybe this was too chalky. Like, the only play that was... Well, I mean, Austin Eckler and Curtis Samuel being relatively low owned, I think is fine. And also, no, I mean, you did bring it to where it was against Dalvin Cook. Like, this leverages Dalvin Cook in Justin Jefferson and Curtis Samuel. The Jets defense leverages the Miami stacks. This is a very, very good lineup, and it did spark a very good discussion of when it is necessary to game stack and when maybe you can have an exception to that rule. So that I think is probably going to be the last one that I review because I think that's just a really, really good point to end on. But as always, I'm always happy to help in the Discord and in the community. And if you ever want to DM me and talk about your lineups, I have a couple people who do that, and I try to train them up the best that I can. I am going to cut off this stream here. This has been great. This has been a good review. I got waxed this week, but that's okay. There are a lot of ups and downs that happen throughout the entire DFS season, and especially in the NFL season where we have so many short samples. So it's okay to have losing weeks. It's okay to have losing months. Like, down streaks happen. It is what it is. You get back on your horse and you keep building and building and building and have that long-term strategy. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. My name is James McCool. You can find all my content over at paydirt.ghost.io. If you guys have any questions, you can find me on Twitter at paydirt_DFS. And I am going to go build some PGA models for the Thursday contests. And I will talk to you guys later. But thank you so much for tuning in. Bye.